I didn't plan to ruin anyone's career. Honestly, I didn't even plan to stand up for myself. I've spent most of my adult life being the quiet guy in the corner of the office, the one who fixes the numbers nobody understands, smooths out the messes nobody admits to making, and gets thanked with a passing "good work, man" that never means anything. If you'd asked me 6 months ago who I was, I would have said, someone who keeps things running. That was it. That was the whole identity. But it's funny how fast a person can change when someone steps on your dignity just one time too many. And for me, it happened in a meeting that should have been boring and routine. The company retreat had been a rumor for weeks. People whispering about Hawaii, about beachfront rooms, about strategic vision sessions that everyone knew would end with Mai Tais and branded hoodies. I didn't envy them. Retreats were exactly what they sounded like. Retreats from the work. But I was proud that I'd built the budget for it. Every projection, every travel estimate, every vendor comparison. I'd done it because my boss, Mark, asked me to, and that was enough for me. I wasn't expecting praise. I wasn't expecting a pat on the back. I just wanted to be treated like a human being. Instead, he made an example out of me. We were in the main conference room, fluorescent lights humming, the kind of room that smells like old carpet and dry coffee. Mark stood at the head of the table, like he always did, hands clasped, a little too rehearsed, a little too charismatic, in that way corporate managers practice in the mirror. The team sat around him, half listening, half scrolling. Slack under the table. I was near the end, as usual, flipping through my notebook because it gave my hands something to do. Mark cleared his throat dramatically. All right, team. Big update on the leadership retreat. People perked up. A few exchanged excited glances. Someone whispered, I hope they do the sunset cruise again. Another said, God, I need a vacation. And then Mark scanned the room with this self-satisfied smirk, the kind he saved for moments when he wanted to feel powerful. I've finalized the attendee list, he said. Most of you here will be coming. It's going to be an exciting opportunity to set the tone for the next fiscal year. I didn't think about myself. I honestly didn't. I just nodded, ready to hear logistics, because that's what my brain does. Organizes, anticipates, supports. He went through names. Everyone nodded politely. Then his eyes landed on me. And Ryan, he said louder than necessary, you're not coming. The room shifted, not dramatically, not with gasps or whispers, just that subtle tightening in the air when something uncomfortable happens. A few people pretended to look at their laptops. Someone clicked a pen twice to fill the silence. I blinked. Sorry? It came out calmer than I felt. Mark waved a hand like he was brushing lint off his shirt. It's not a big deal. We just need someone here to hold down the fort. You know, keep things running, he chuckled. Plus, retreats are for leadership material, right? You're more operations. Operations. The word landed like a weight. He didn't mean skilled with processes. He meant not important enough, not worth the cost of a plane ticket, not worth a bed in the resort where he'd be drinking neon cocktails and posting motivational quotes on LinkedIn about team synergy. I felt heat crawl up my neck. The meeting moved on. People asked questions about check-in times and dress codes, the kind of useless details people obsess over when free travel is involved. And I sat there, staring at the edge of my notebook, wondering why the hell it stung so much this time. It wasn't the trip. I didn't want Hawaii. I wanted respect. I wanted the bare minimum acknowledgement that the work I did mattered, that I mattered. After the meeting, I went back to my desk with that numb, buzzing feeling you get after someone humiliates you just softly enough that you can't call it humiliation without sounding dramatic. My email pinged. It was Mark. Ryan, make sure the retreat budget is finalized today. Need it polished for the exec deck. Thanks. No apology, no clarification, not a single word to soften what he'd done. So I opened the file. I've seen thousands of spreadsheets. They blend together after a while. But when I reopened the retreat budget, something hit me that hadn't before. maybe because I'd never looked at it through the lens of someone pushed aside. There was a line item I didn't recognize. Event logistics partner, Pacific Apex Consulting. 38,400. Strange. I'd compared 5 vendors. None of them were named Pacific Apex. I scrolled. There were duplicate hotel charges, inconsistent per diem entries, and a wellness program facilitator fee that was almost absurdly high. None of it matched the original sourcing notes, but here's the thing. Everything had an approval signature. Mark's. I sat back, my chair creaking. Something in me, something tired, something fed up, shifted. I'd swallowed a lot over the years, credit stolen, hours lost, boundaries ignored. But this moment felt different. Not because I wanted revenge, and not because I felt bold. It felt different because it was the first time I saw a crack in his perfect little world. I copied the entire folder, not to my personal email, not to cloud storage, nothing reckless, just to a secure internal archive we used for versioning. A normal, approved action, something he couldn't argue with. I wasn't thinking about drama or justice or exposing anything. I just knew one thing. If Mark was going to treat me like I didn't matter, then for the first time, I was going to stop treating his actions like they didn't matter either. The thing about noticing one irregularity is that it changes the way you see everything. Before that day, the Hawaii budget was just another spreadsheet, another moving part in a company that loved strategic experiences more than strategic decisions. But after Mark's little performance in the conference room, the numbers didn't look neutral anymore. They looked intentional. I didn't jump to conclusions. I don't operate that way. My job, my whole career, has been built on checking, cross-checking, verifying, documenting. So I treated this the same way I treat any anomaly. I followed the data. Over the next few days, whenever I had a break between actual responsibilities, I compared the Hawaii retreat to previous company offsites. We'd done Colorado the year before, Asheville before that, and a cheaper virtual culture week during the pandemic. I pulled those budgets, opened them side by side, and let patterns reveal themselves. It didn't take long. Pacific Apex Consulting, that mysterious vendor, had shown up before. Small invoices at first, tucked into different team events, a planning session, an innovation workshop, a quarterly morale initiative. Each invoice was just clean enough to slide by unnoticed, but now that I was looking for them, the repetition jumped off the screen. Then there were the flights. I looked at the travel drafts and saw that 3 employees, all from Mark's inner circle, had medical accommodation approvals for first-class upgrades, except none of them had medical notes on file. I checked twice. HR keeps that documentation confidential, but they do confirm whether it exists. It didn't. I wasn't thinking fraud. I wasn't hunting for anything. I was just doing the job I was always told I was good at, finding the inconsistencies so other people could take credit for fixing them. But something was different now. I drafted an email, short, neutral, factual. Hi, Mark. Quick question. I noticed Pacific Apex Consulting listed on several events, including Hawaii. Could you remind me who the main contact is there? Want to make sure our vendor list is up to date. I stared at the message before sending it, making sure it sounded casual, non-threatening, like the sort of thing a detail-oriented analyst might ask. His reply came 3 minutes later. Ryan, don't overthink this stuff. They're a partner we've used before. Focus on your core tasks. We don't need to reanalyze every line item. The X. He CC'd 2 people. That CC was the real message. In Mark's world, copying others on an email was how he framed narratives. Someone once joked that he treated the CC field like an audience selection tool. The more people he wanted on his side, the longer the CC list. I let it go, on the surface anyway. I kept doing my other work, but every time I opened the retreat files, my mind drifted back to those entries that didn't align. Later that week, he cut me out of a planning meeting I normally attended. I saw the invite go out to the rest of the team. My name simply wasn't there. Then he canceled our weekly 1-1 with a cryptic, "Need to prioritize leadership alignment this week." Leadership alignment. Right. That irritation, that quiet, slow-burning kind of irritation that sits just under your ribs, didn't make me reckless. It made me thorough. I started pulling the vendor payment history for Pacific Apex. Just dates, amounts, categories. All standard access information for my role. Nothing secret, nothing inappropriate. The LLC's payments formed a clean arc upward. Not explosive, not dramatic chop, just steady inflation. If you weren't looking at all the events together, you'd never catch it. But stacked side by side, the pattern was unmistakable. The next day, I stopped by the office of someone I trusted. Not a friend, not a confidant, just someone whose job required precision. Maria, a senior accountant with a reputation for being impossible to fool. I didn't bring accusations. I didn't even bring theories. I brought questions. "Hey, quick process thing," I said. "If a vendor shows up across multiple departments, but always tied to the same approver, is that normal?" She looked up from her dual monitors. "Depends. What kind of vendor?" I gave her the sanitized version. "Event logistics. Pacific Apex." Her eyebrows shifted just slightly. Not shock, just recognition that the name meant something. "Who approved?" "Mark," I said. She paused. Then, "Do you know who owns the LLC?" "No," I said. "Should I?" "Maybe. Maybe not." She leaned back. "Look, I can't dig into this unless it comes through the proper channels. But if something feels off, document what you see. Dates, amounts, categories, approvals. Facts only. Facts only." My comfort zone. She added, "If someone were hypothetically routing personal expenses through a shell vendor, an audit could catch it. But only if the audit is triggered, and only if the documentation is clear." Her tone wasn't dramatic. It wasn't conspiratorial. It was procedural. That's how I knew she wasn't feeding me a story. She was giving me the rules of engagement. That night, after the office emptied out and the hum of conversations faded into the white noise of the HVAC system, I sat at my desk and opened a blank document. I wrote down everything I'd seen. Dates, vendors, approvals, discrepancies. I attached screenshots, pulled version histories, saved email threads, all of it factual. No adjectives, no interpretations. When I submitted it through the company's ethics portal, I didn't feel bold. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt steady. I expected a generic acknowledgement email. What I got instead was a message from the internal compliance officer. "Thank you for your detailed submission. Based on the information provided, we will be initiating a preliminary review. You may be contacted by internal audit for follow-up questions." Professional, cold, neutral. But the next line wasn't neutral. "This may involve external auditors depending on the findings." External auditors for a retreat budget. I leaned back, heart beating just a little harder than normal, not from fear, but from clarity. I'd spent years cleaning up other people's carelessness, years being the invisible hands that made bad decisions look tidy, years thinking that staying quiet made me mature. But now, for the first time, the consequences weren't pointed at me, and something in the air had shifted in a way I hadn't expected. Because the moment the audit team got involved, the Hawaii trip wouldn't just be a vacation anymore. It would be evidence. The first sign that the audit had actually begun wasn't an announcement. It was silence. The kind that settles over a floor when people sense something is wrong, but can't name it yet. Conversations got shorter. Doors closed more quietly. Slack channels that normally buzzed with jokes slowed to a cautious trickle. Then the calendar invites started. Internal audit, inquiry session. 30 minutes. No agenda, no details. Just a block of time dropped on multiple people's schedules. Mark brushed it off with a laugh. "Don't panic, everyone. These things happen every year. Just cooperate and move on." Except nothing about this felt routine. 2 days later, a pair of auditors showed up on our floor. Not the usual finance staff. These were external contractors. Badges clipped to their belts. Expressions neutral in that way professionals use when they don't want to tip their hand. They sat in an empty conference room for hours, laptops open, heads down. By noon, people were whispering. By evening, no one was whispering anymore. Everyone was watching. I kept my routine. That was important. You don't act different when the spotlight moves. You stay steady. I worked my tasks. I answered emails. I didn't hover near the conference room, though I could feel its gravity pulling everyone's curiosity toward it. My turn came the next morning. An auditor, a calm woman named Barrett, greeted me at the door with a polite nod. "Thanks for making time, Ryan. We just want to clarify workflow, approvals, and historical vendor usage." Her tone was professional, not warm, not cold. That neutrality grounded me. This wasn't personal. This wasn't retaliation. This was process. She asked about my responsibilities, version histories, how budgets flow through our system, the chain of approvals. She asked about Pacific Apex. Not what I thought of them, just how they were used. I answered factually. Clean, simple, no speculation, no adjectives. When I finished, she closed her folder. Thank you. This was very helpful. That was all. But outside the conference room, I could feel Mark watching me. He stood near his office door with his arms crossed, trying to look casual, but the tension in his jaw gave him away. "Everything good?" he asked. "Just routine questions," I said. "About process." He smiled, a tight, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Good, good. Glad you could clarify for them." But he didn't walk away. He just stood there, gaze fixed on me, longer than it needed to be, as if trying to read something in my expression. I kept mine neutral. Later that day, I saw him pull two of his closest allies, Tim and Julia, into his office. The door shut. Voices rose, not shouting, but heated enough to bleed into the hallway. They emerged 10 minutes later, looking shaken, glancing around as if the walls themselves were listening. The next morning, HR sent a company-wide memo. As part of a scheduled compliance review, all departments must ensure their expense documentation is available and complete. Scheduled. Right. People started comparing notes. Did they ask you about travel? Did they talk about vendor ownership? Did they request historical invoices? The more they talked, the clearer it became. This wasn't a random check. This was targeted. I wasn't proud of what I felt then, a quiet satisfaction settling into my chest. But I wasn't ashamed of it either. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't triumph. It was justice taking shape in real time. By Friday, the pattern was obvious. The auditors asked about Pacific Apex, event budgets for the past 2 years, first-class travel approvals, the retreat attendee list, duplicate hotel charges. Not a single question fell outside those lanes. Late that afternoon, Barrett stopped by my desk. "Ryan, could we borrow a minute?" Her tone was steady, but something in her eyes told me this meeting mattered more than the last. Inside the conference room, she opened her laptop to a spreadsheet I hadn't seen before. A cross-referenced audit log, payments, vendors, approval chains, ownership records. At the top, highlighted in yellow, was Pacific Apex. She rotated the screen slightly so I could see without leaning in. "Is this consistent with what you've observed?" she asked. I read the entries. Payments had been funneled through the same LLC for 2 years. Ownership records tied the business to someone with the same last name as Mark's brother-in-law. Approval signatures all belonged to Mark. No competitive bids, no procurement involvement, no secondary approvals. It wasn't just sloppy. It was constructed. I nodded once. "That aligns with what I've seen." She closed the laptop gently. "Thank you. That's all we needed." That phrase, "all we needed," carried a weight that settled in my chest like a stone dropped into water. Not heavy with fear, heavy with inevitability. The next Monday, Mark wasn't in the office. He wasn't on Slack. His status was blank. No out-of-office message. No meeting cancellations. At 10:14 a.m., HR sent another email. Please note that all inquiries regarding event planning or vendor contracting should be redirected to finance operations until further notice. Until further notice. Corporate language for something has happened. At 11:03 a.m., two security staff walked onto our floor. They weren't dramatic. They didn't make a scene. They just walked straight into Mark's office and shut the door. People froze. A few minutes later, the door opened. Mark stepped out, jaw tight, face pale, holding a cardboard box. Not overstuffed, just the essentials. A photo frame, a leather notebook, a mug that said, "Best boss ever," which had always felt like a joke anyway. He looked straight ahead, not left or right. He didn't look at me. As he walked away, the room felt suspended, as if the air itself held its breath. But even then, even in that moment when the balance of power shifted, I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was something quieter, sharper, more controlled, the sense that a very long equation had finally balanced itself. Not because of anger, not because of revenge, because the truth had nowhere left to hide. And just when the floor began to unfreeze, when people started moving again, when a few whispers finally broke the silence, I heard something I didn't expect. My name. Not spoken loudly, not commanding, just a soft voice behind me. "Ryan, they want to see you in the CFO's office." Everything around me stilled again, because whatever happened next wasn't chaos. It was consequence. The CFO's office sits at the far end of the executive hallway, a place I'd only ever passed on my way to restrooms during all-hands meetings. The carpet is thicker there, the lights warmer, the silence heavier. When I walked in, I felt none of the triumph I'd imagined people might feel in situations like this. Just a steady awareness that whatever came next wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be factual. The CFO, a composed woman named Evelyn Hart, motioned for me to sit. She didn't smile, but her expression wasn't cold. It was analytical, like she was assessing both my presence and the context around it. "Ryan," she said, folding her hands on her desk, "thank you for coming." I nodded. "Of course." "We've concluded the preliminary findings of the audit," she continued. "I can't share the full report yet. Legal is still finalizing the language, but I can confirm that your documentation was accurate, complete, and helpful in understanding what occurred." Her tone never shifted from neutral professionalism, but I could hear what she wasn't saying. You weren't mistaken. You weren't dramatic. You weren't retaliating. You were right, she continued. I also want to acknowledge that you followed procedure correctly. You documented facts, not opinions. You used the ethics channel instead of personal escalation. You maintained confidentiality. That matters. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that until she said it. "Based on the findings," she said, "Mark's employment has been terminated for cause. Some of the financial losses will be recovered. We're implementing new controls and restructuring several approval pathways." I kept my expression steady, not out of restraint, but because the emotion I felt wasn't explosive. It was quiet, solid, like a knot inside me had finally loosened enough for me to breathe fully. Evelyn added, "There's one more thing. We'd like to adjust your role." That caught me off guard. "Adjust how?" "You're very good at seeing patterns," she said. "More importantly, you're disciplined in how you handle them. We need people like that in our oversight processes. If you're open to it, we'd like to move you into a compliance-integrated finance role. Better pay. Direct reporting line, clearer boundaries." It wasn't a promotion built on drama or pity. It was simply the natural consequence of someone doing their job well when it mattered. "I'm open to it," I said quietly. "Good," she replied. "HR will follow up." No grand speeches, no handshakes of destiny, just the formal recognition that I had done the right thing, and the company was responding the way a company should. When I left her office, the hallway seemed different. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was the way I carried myself. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was trying to shrink into the edges of the company. I felt like I actually occupied space. Back on my floor, things had shifted. Not dramatically. This wasn't the movies. But the small details said enough. People who used to breeze past me without eye contact now paused for a second before walking on. A few nodded. One quietly said, "Hey man, just wanted to say I'm glad you're still here." No one mentioned Mark, not directly, but his office was empty, his nameplate gone, and the meeting he'd been preparing for, the Hawaii retreat, had been officially canceled. Pending restructuring of leadership development initiatives. Corporate language for the party's over. I spent the next few weeks transitioning into my new role. The work was deeper, more complex, and somehow lighter. Not because it was easier, but because it was honest. I wasn't cleaning up someone else's shortcuts anymore. I was helping design systems that would prevent them. My new manager, a quiet, detail-oriented guy named Chen, didn't treat me like backup labor. He treated me like a colleague whose judgment mattered. He asked for my input. He listened. He challenged me, but with respect, not control. One afternoon, after we finalized a new travel approval workflow, he glanced over and said, "We'll need someone from finance to join the offsite next quarter. It's small. 2 days, nothing fancy. I'd like you to come." There was no performance, no ego, no subtext, just a simple acknowledgement that my presence added value. "I'd like that," I said, but the real closure didn't come from work. It came the following month when I opened my calendar and blocked off a week of PTO. Not for Hawaii. That symbol belonged to a version of me who needed external validation. Instead, I booked a quiet cabin near the coast, nothing extravagant. A place to rest, breathe, and exist without fluorescent lights or approval workflows. As I sat on the deck the first night, watching the ocean pull the horizon into itself, I finally understood something I hadn't realized I was searching for. Revenge wasn't the point. It never had been. The point was reclaiming my own sense of self, the part of me that had gone quiet after years of being talked over, sidelined, minimized. The part of me that had forgotten it had a voice at all. Mark didn't lose his job because I wanted him gone. He lost it because he built his world on shortcuts and assumed no one would ever trace them. I wasn't the hero of that story. I was simply the one person who stopped pretending not to see. And that was enough. On my last morning before heading home, I made coffee and watched the sun rise in complete silence. Not the tense silence of an office waiting for consequences. Not the silence of holding back anger. Just peace. For the first time in years, peace. I didn't need an audience. I didn't need recognition. I didn't need to win. I just needed to stop letting other people decide who I was. And somewhere, in that quiet space between the ocean and the sky, I realized I had.